And joining me right now, we have Dana Stroll, Research Director for the Washington Institute for Near East Policy and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Dana, welcome. So we know that the U.S. has been looking for information on the missing American Austin Tice. How does the State Department go about gathering any leads amid the fall of the Assad regime? Because there's got to be a level of chaos going on there, right? Does it reach out to rebel leaders? Is it up to our intelligence community? I mean, where do they start?
Thanks so much for that question, Alex. I mean, what's so heartbreaking about this story is that Austin Tice's family has repeatedly gone public this week and talked about firm, credible evidence that they believe he's still alive. And in that very press conference with Secretary Blinken today, what he said was that entities within the U.S. government are talking to HTS, that rebel group that's in charge of Syria right now, in order to locate Austin Tice. They even sent a representative from the State Department to Lebanon to actually try to coordinate. So I think there's both intelligence agency communication and diplomatic negotiation to locate Austin, which is just shows you how committed the administration is to finding him.
I was going to say that's definitely clearly a priority. So the Biden administration used the chaos during the Assad regime's last hours to strike ISIS targets. Will the administration and the incoming Trump administration, will they work with a new Syrian government to keep suppressing ISIS, or do you think the U.S. will keep acting on its own discretion?
Well, right now, U.S. forces, there's about 900 in Syria working with an entity called the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are predominantly Syrian Kurds, but also Arabs. And they're there to both continue doing military strikes against ISIS, but also the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, are maintaining custody of 9,000 ISIS fighters who are still in detention, and also displaced persons camps. There's 40,000 women and children who still would like to go home. And until the world has a solution to those two groups of people, the enduring defeat of ISIS isn't achieved. President Trump has talked about the U.S. having no role in this fight and getting out. But I think what we've seen at this point is that what happens in Syria doesn't stay in Syria. And so we need to continue to keep pressure on this terrorist group.
And Matt Bradley touched on this, but officials are mulling over lifting the terror designation from the Syrian rebel group HTS and the $10 million bounty from its leader, al-Jawlani. What are the challenges establishing a working relationship? Can there be trust between both parties this early? I mean, al-Jawlani, he's saying positive things, but is that enough to start talks? And last question, I'm throwing a lot at you. Would Trump restore the terrorist designation potentially once in office?
So I think at this point, the assessment is that HTS and its leader, al-Jawlani, is saying the right things about governing in a way that's reflective of the will of all Syrians, regardless of ethnicity, religion, sect, geography, et cetera. And Secretary Blinken actually laid out criteria that the U.S. is looking at in order to move forward with HTS, which again is that inclusive governance, continuity in services, making sure that Syria doesn't become a base for al-Qaeda or other global jihadist groups to export terror and plan terrorist attacks, and also the security of that chemical weapons stockpile from Assad that we still haven't completed that mission. I think it's also important to remember there's U.S. terrorist designations, but there's also United Nations terrorist designations. So this isn't something that one country can decide to do on its own. It's the entire Security Council, and that's going to take some time.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that last point. I do want to turn to the drone sightings here at home because the reports indicate numerous sightings in Maryland, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. House Speaker Johnson was given a classified briefing as state and Capitol Hill officials are calling for transparency. The White House has downplayed the sightings, saying DHS, FBI, state and local law enforcement have not corroborated the sightings and don't believe they pose a threat. And yet, is there something we don't know publicly, which Speaker Johnson may have learned in his briefing? But from what you know, what's your assessment here? Anything to be concerned about?
Well, I certainly can't speak to what happens in classified briefings. I think what's important here is that if the American people are concerned, then the U.S. government needs to be concerned, and they're investigating it. But when it comes to different aerial phenomena that are flying around U.S. military bases, whether in the United States or in the Middle East, that base commander has all the authority he or she needs to shoot it down if it's believed to be a threat. And that's what we do in the Middle East. And I think part of what's happening in the United States is that around these critical installations, it's not yet deemed to be an imminent threat. And so the administration's not at the point of taking military action. They want to be methodical about it and make sure they know what they're dealing with.
And also, were they to shoot it down, it might injure people on the ground. They've got to be careful with that, too, Dana. All right, Dana Stroll, It's good to see you. Thank you so much.